My name is Mark. This is Zen Talk, and the topic is Zen and Dogenism. So, we need to discuss Dogen, who is considered the founder of Japanese Zen, and what exactly did Dogen teach and say, and what is the issues with it. Dogen and the new religion. Perhaps there was no finer rival of Dogenism, that would be sitting Zen, or called Zazen in Japanese, than the Zenist. Now I need to point out that the Zenist is my mentor, and that is just to make it clear from where I'm coming from. So there are undisputable points that the Zenist brings up about Dogenism. And Dogenism is considered the views of Dogen. So, just a little bit about Dogen. He was a Japanese 12th century monk who claims he went to China and claims that he met up with the Kaldong sect and claims to have not only gotten the mind transmission but the silk transmission, which has now been more or less disputed because now the researchers have some pretty strong evidence that the silk that Dogen brought back from China, which still is in the possession of the Soto Shu, is actually a forgery. And basically Dogen came back to Japan from China claiming to have the authentic teachings of Buddha. And by current Japanese academic standards, Dogen basically created a new religion, which was nothing like Tendai and nothing like Japan has ever seen before, calling itself Buddhism. Okay, so getting back to what the Zenist has brought up about Dogenism, that being again the views of Dogen. Dogen Zen is not the Zen of China or Korea, which is more congruent with the Mahayana Buddhism. And for anyone who has studied the Buddhist canon, Dogen Zen is quite radical and unsupported. Neither the Mahayana canon nor the Pali canon provides any good evidence for his views. And Dogen basically wants us to understand that when we just sit, or the same practice Zazen, that we are abiding in Buddha reality itself. This is a lot of rubbish in that nothing of what Dogen has said in any of his writings is supported by any of the Mahayana sutras, by any of the Zen and Ch'an of China and Korea. So Dogen creates a new religion through his writings in that not supported in comparison to the Mahayana canon. So we have to look at the Mahayana and the light of the Mahayana, which Zen basically takes its complete founding from, is the Lakavantara Sutra. And I will be having another video on this soon, so come back. Which is considered the true baptism into the light of the Mahayana. So we can compare Dogen to the Lankavatara Sutra. So Dogen claims that nirvana is just sitting zazen. Yet when we look at the Mahayana Sutras, which is more incongruent with China and Korea and even Vietnam, we see nirvana termed as the unborn. and the basically unconceptualized Dharma. And it is the ultimate reality, the supreme end. And this realization is far more than just sitting in a full or half lotus posture for endless hours. What became of Dogen's teachings after he passed away? Remember, he's a 12th century monk. And that was quite a long time ago. So after Dogen, the successors made many reforms to Dogen's new religion. Whereas Kazon, who is more or less considered the second founder of the Soto Shu, and I think he was like third or fourth from Dogen, as in the ancestry. He basically distanced the entire church from Dogen to embrace a Chinese Soto view of Zen Buddhism. So the great reformer Kazon, or Sekito Kizon, as we would call him in the Zen centers, his changes basically put all of Dogen's new religion views into the basement. And as the years marched on, Dogen's writings was only for the most senior monks to read. It was not published or taught as common Zen Buddhism in Japan. And this was even prior to World War II. I was told a story that the monks that would actually read the founder's writings were quite shocked and quite stunned at Dogen's views that were so anti-Buddhist and so such focus that Zazen was Buddhism, but Zazen is Buddha, that this is why the writings of Dogen and his books were basically locked away and only allowed for the most senior monks to read. So it wasn't until 1970s, and so actually in the 50s, is when Dogen's writings appeared, and in the 70s is when they started to appear and be translated from Japanese to English. So in the 50s, Dogen's writings emerged from the dark vaults of the Soto Shu, mostly through academic research and interest, and started to appear in print. And this sort of led to a Dogenism within the Japanese Zen community. And so remember, the Soto Shu is just a church, a organization, and the Japanese Zen community is very vast, with a lot of independent practitioners and independent thinking about this. You can have one guy who can decide, well, I'm just going to be a Zen practitioner, and have really no connection to the Soto Shu. So this Dogenism, this view within this Japanese community, was eventually brought over to the West. So we need to ask ourselves, is Dogenism even Buddhism? And in my view, that Dogenism is far more a belief in a performance art, in that sitting Zazen is to become Buddha, basically the belief that the sitting Zazen is abiding in Buddha reality. And this is more or less what comes out of Dogen's writings, that sitting Zazen is to become Buddha, sitting like a Buddha statue is to become Buddha, and you're abiding in ultimate reality by Zazen, or ultimate Buddha reality by Zazen. And that Zazen and Buddhism is the same thing. This is pretty much stressed all throughout Dogen's writings, that the performance art is Buddhism, and it's the same thing. So this would be kind of very similar to some of these Qigong cults that have been going around China and now here in the USA, that by performing particular postures, these are 5 or 7 Qigong postures, that the postures themselves is the same thing as the entire Buddhist canon, that these are mystical postures, and that these are mystical positions that you assume and hold for a period of time, and that these postures bring all of this Buddha field, all of this Buddha reality to you, and that that's all you have to do. And so that these postures is Buddhism, and that these postures is the Buddha reality. So these kind of culty thinkings are definitely here in the United States as well, and they are very prevalent. And so the Zazen is just another aspect of this performance art in the belief that a posture is the Buddha reality, and is the same thing as Buddhism. Though for any of the Zen people who care to look into the Mahayana scriptures or into core Buddhism, none of this is supported in any of the Mahayana or core Buddhism itself. And this is something that a lot of Zen centers, they know this, and they sort of discourage the students from actually studying the Mahayana scriptures, because it becomes apparent after a bit of study that what Dogen teaches and what the Mahayana teaches are worlds apart. They're not the same thing at all. And after a while, you come down to the understanding that sitting Zazen isn't really it. And more or less, a lot of Zen students who come to the Zen Center and they do the Zazen, and they kind of read Dogen, and then they start reading the Mahayana scriptures, they start to realize that Zazen ain't doing it. Zazen ain't cutting it. And a lot of Zen students eventually become disillusioned, and they leave, and they give up, and they decide that this whole Zen thing ain't for them. And that's because they're not really practicing Zen, and they're not really learning Buddhism. They're learning Dogenism, the new religion. So let's talk about Dogenism. So Dogenism becomes a new religion by Japanese academic standards, and is considered heretical to Buddhism. So Japan has a real disdain for new religions. A lot of times new religions are problems. They do things that are detrimental to society in general. Sometimes new religions can act out violently, such as gassing subways in Tokyo. And other times they can do things as in telling the members of the new religion to distance from relatives and parents. So, like I said, by Japanese standards, Dogen is a new religion, and Dogenism falls under all of the standards of new religion, and they're highly looked down upon. Also, China and the other Mahayana Zen sects and in other countries view Japanese Zen as abhorrent. Master Xing Yang, for example, really has a disdain for Dogen and the kind of Zen that is found in Japan, and has even gone as far as to ridicule Dogen and the Japanese Zen students that find his way into their centers. So, and it's mostly because of the kind of the insistence that this Zazen is what the Buddha taught and is the same thing as all of Buddhism. And you will find that Chinese Ch'an, Korean Son, the Vietnamese Zen sects completely disagree with everything that Dogen says and look down upon Japanese Zen. So people a lot of times want to ask, well, what about meditation? I mean, isn't Zazen meditation? And sometimes Zazen is referred to as meditation. A lot of the Zen centers have taken the term Zazen out and put meditation in. And that is because of the kind of the connotation of Dogenism. The Zen centers are distancing themselves from Dogen themselves. And that is because, again, a lot of the students who kind of fall into Dogenism realize it doesn't go anywhere, and they leave. So let's look at what really Buddhist meditation is. And the Buddhist meditation is more of the mind turning inward to itself to illuminate the nature of its own suffering. This is what it is. Meditation is not a joyride. Meditation is not a blissed out moment. Though these things can happen when the mind illuminates its own suffering and relinquishes the suffering, a blissful moment can happen, a moment of peace. So meditation can be done standing, walking, sitting, and lying down. This is also known as the 4 positions of the monk. Sitting is the most easiest because it's stationary and in one place, and you're not necessarily, you're easy to find. Though you can do it laying down. You definitely see aspects of walking meditations with the monks walking very slow. It almost looks like they're floating. There are aspects of standing meditation. But basically, if you really look at this all together, meditation is basically being said it can be done in all positions, no matter what you're doing. I imagine, you could even say, well, I like to run, I like to jog, and I enter into a meditational state, which is sometimes called the runner's high. And again, I would say yes, that can be a valid meditational position, running or swimming. So meditation can happen whenever the mind focuses. You could even have meditation when you're working. And a resolve of the mind to know what is happening in mind. So your mind is focusing, but is also focusing on the happenings of the mind. So also, we look at what Buddha taught. Buddha taught the disciples to know the roots of the suffering and to cut those roots, thus achieving the spiritual liberation from suffering. We're cutting away from samsara. We're chipping away at the bonds that hold us to this phenomenal rebirth and cycle. And this is kind of, really important to have this firm grasp of what Buddha taught, what the Mahayana taught, and what the Bodhisattva is all about. And when you have achieved these things and these understandings, one starts to understand truly what meditation is about, and it's not zazen. Meditation can be performed anywhere you happen to be at, in all places and all things. So, in conclusion, I'll just state again, and I've stated this before, Zen, Zen can really be said to be the intuitive understanding for oneself, the ultimate nature of reality. And this understanding for oneself brings the enlightenment, and it's the intuitive enlightenment. It's a knowing beyond words. It's a knowing beyond objectification and form. So the sitting meditation is just one expression of the meditation. However, the point of Zen is to abide in the intuitive knowing in all aspects of one's existence in this phenomenal world, not just in the zendo. And it has been asked before, Zen students go to the Zen teacher and they say, so Zen only exists in the zendo. And the teacher's like, well, no, it's not just to only exist in the zendo. Zen is to exist in all things that you're doing. And then the person goes, so am I to bring my meditation cushion then to all things that I'm doing? And the Zen teacher's like, yeah, no, you really can't do that. You just have to bring Zen to all things that you're doing. You do Zazen at all things. And so the whole conversation sort of breaks itself in that the Zen teacher is basically caught in a trap, in where in one hand, they're trying to preach what Dogen was teaching, that sitting meditation is the Buddha field and is Buddhism. But on the other hand, they're saying, well, but you need to bring that into all things. And how can you do that when it's not what Dogen explicitly taught? So this leads to a lot of confusion, frustration, and this is the point where a lot of Zen students say, yeah, I'm kind of done with Dogen, and they're gone. Out they go, off to the next thing. So when we come to Zen, we come to Zen, and we are exposed to the Bodhisattva, and we actually become reborn as the Bodhisattva, which is the sentient being who strives to become Buddha. This is really what this is going on here. Zen is an expedient means when properly understood and practiced. Zen is also considered to be a methodology, and I have in earlier videos talked about this methodology of Zen. It's a kind of one of these words that has a dual meaning, and Zen is not necessarily, it just means, as people say, yeah, if you can't describe Zen, Zen is not understandable. And there's a lot of people that would say that, if you say anything about Zen, then whatever you say is wrong. And that this is not necessarily the case. Zen is one of these words that can take on multiple meanings. When we say Zen in the pop culture, we're kind of meaning peace and calm and serenity. When we say Zen in more of the academic stances, we're more or less talking about mind and the aspect of pure mind. And when we're speaking of Zen in the religious aspect, we're talking about that of cutting to the core nature of oneself, the built-up illusion of who you are, the built-up illusion of what you think ultimate reality is. And it's more or less pushing the student to kind of go into this intuitive understanding. And a lot of times the koans and sort of the things that the various Zen methods that have been introduced can push the student to go beyond conceptualization into the intuitive. And that is where they themselves have that glimpse of ultimate reality, which is the Kensho, is the turning moment, is the awakening. So Zen is a means and ways of the Bodhisattva path, and the Bodhisattva path is the ultimate within the Mahayana, which is what Zen Buddhism is part of. Can you have Zen without the Mahayana? Probably. Can you have Zen without being a Bodhisattva? Sure. But for what point, I couldn't even tell you. So it is probably important for me to comment of my own practice. This is, me who is speaking. And, I need to say that, I have not sat Zazen in probably 23 years. Now that might be shocking, because you would say, well, here's this guy, he's teaching a thing called the Path of Zen, and he doesn't sit Zazen. And that is because I realized that Dogen was dead wrong. That what he called Zen was not Zen. It was just his own new religion, his own new take. And he just borrowed Buddha to more or less promote his new religion. Remember, Dogen he was not just a poor monk from nowhere. He was from a noble family, well respected. His family was well respected by other families, and He was definitely respected by the shogun and the shogunate of his day. So he wasn't somebody that didn't have a fair amount of political power, because he did. And when he brought this new religion, more or less, to combat the Tendai, because that was pretty much the dominant form of Buddhism in Japan, and probably, and it was, and now still is, the state religion is Tendai. Because Dogen was a Tendai monk. That's where he came from. He came from the Tendai schools. But yet, Tendai has its own issues, and even in the 12th century, Tendai had its issues. So, as turbulent times were upon Dogen, with many different factions, political factions and samurai factions fighting it out, it kind of became Dogen's own kind of immediacy to bring a Buddhism to Japan, or to find a Buddhism in Japan that was distinct and different and apart from the Tendai. And that is what happened. Dogen's various friends and Dogen's various acquaintances picked up on his views and even took it right to the shogun themselves. And the shogun would be like a regional warlord or regional governance, and was impressed with Dogen's sayings. And it was said that the shogun was believed that he was being possessed by all the dead, and Dogen more or less lived in the shogun's house for years, for a very long time, and even taught the children of the shogun. And thus, his particular brand of Buddhism was promoted by the shogun and thus the samurai. And in Japan, when you have the state more or less sponsoring your religion and saying this is true Buddhism, pretty much everybody else goes along with it, or you kind of get your head cut off. So, getting back to my own practice, if you go to the practice of the Buddha, the practice of the Mahayana, which is sincerely, at all things, all times, all places, look within your own self. Look at your own suffering, look at your own mind, and dig out the roots of your suffering in all things. The person that cuts you off in the car, the person who was not nice to you, just all these billions and millions of little things that constantly bring up self, constantly bring up suffering, and constantly bring up, who are you and why are you suffering and what is the attachment? And you just dig deeper and deeper to the root, and then when you just yank that root out and you cut it, the ultimate liberation happens. And that's done in all things, all areas. Even listening to videos, you can hear something, or something is said that sort of bothers you, and you're basically saying, this guy's all wrong. But where is that feeling coming from? What is the root of that disagreement? What is the root of all that? So this is why it's important as a Buddhist, and it's important as a Mahayanist, and it's important as a Bodhisattva, that we have a firm grasp of the teachings of the Bodhisattva, the teachings of the Mahayana, and especially what Zen is really trying to push us towards. The means and ways of Zen is, like I said, is just pushing us towards this intuitive understanding, and it's something that it can be very difficult, very, very difficult to get over this conceptualization that we constantly have, that running narrative going in our views and in our mind of what the world is and how it should be. And when we can break from that, and sometimes that takes the work of a very skilled and very talented person sometimes to work with, who can understand you and who can work with you to break you of that habit. And in earlier videos, I have talked about the habitual mind and the habits that we get into. And a lot of times the habitual mind and the habits, it's a form of brainwashing and conditioning. Very difficult to break, very difficult to overcome. And we may seek a teacher, we may seek a community, we may seek means and ways to break that. And Zen is good at that. Zen can break that if you want it to. You just have to have the courage to want to try. All right, so pretty much done with my presentation here. I'll just go back to the full webcam here. I don't think I have any more slides. Oh, that's it there. So I appreciate your time and your attention to this video. I know that a lot of people were told Dogenism is a derogatory word, and a lot of Zen teachers out there, they understand, that, we teach this thing called Zazen and it's called Zen. But in reality, I think that they know deep down that Dogen and Zazen is not Zen, and it's not Buddhism, and it's not really working. But yet it puts butts in seats, and it puts butts in the zendo, and it kind of becomes its own thing. And then when people believe that, well, by doing this setting meditation, I'm going to be Buddha, they pay for that. When you start asking for the donations, and you start asking for the, when you put out the offering plate, people put the money in, and that sort of finances things. A guy like me coming along saying you don't need any of that, that doesn't work within their business plan. So just beware. And it's not to say that you cannot go to the zendo, or that you should not go to the zendo. It's just be aware of what you're actually doing. Meditation is fine. Sitting meditation is fine. But it doesn't necessarily mean that by sitting in meditation that you are Buddha, or that you're in the Buddha field. All right, thank you for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe.